Alright guys, I am back with another chapter in 2 Kings. We're in 2 Kings chapter 17 where the header reads, Israel is exiled to Assyria. Hoshea rules in Israel. So I'm going to jump right into it. So I'm a little out of breath. I was just running around playing soccer with my boys. So catch my breath. Alright, now we'll get started. Hoshea, son of Elah, began to rule over Israel in the 12th year of King Ahaz's reign in Judah. He reigned in Samaria 9 years. He did what was evil in the Lord's sight, but not to the same extent as the kings of Israel who ruled before him. King Shalmaneser of Assyria attacked King Hoshea. So Hoshea was forced to pay heavy tribute to Assyria. But Hoshea stopped paying the annual tribute and conspired against the king of Assyria by asking King So of Egypt to help him shake free of Assyria's power. When the king of Assyria discovered his treachery, he seized Hoshea and put him in prison. Then the king of Assyria invaded the entire land, and for 3 years he besieged the city of Samaria. Finally, in the 9th year of King Hoshea's reign, Samaria fell, and the people of Israel were exiled to Assyria. They were settled in colonies in Halah, along the banks of the Habor River in Gazan, and in the cities of the Medes. This disaster came upon the people of Israel because they worshipped other gods. They sinned against the Lord their God, who had brought them safely out of Egypt and had rescued them from the power of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. They had followed the practices of the pagan nations the Lord had driven from the land ahead of them, as well as the practices the kings of Israel had introduced. The people of Israel had also secretly done many things that were not pleasing to the Lord their God. They built pagan shrines for themselves in all their towns, from the smallest outpost to the largest walled city. They set up sacred pillars and Asherah poles at the top of every hill and under every green tree. They offered sacrifices on all the hilltops, just like the nations the Lord had driven from the land ahead of them. So the people of Israel had done many evil things, arousing the Lord's anger. Yes, they worshipped idols, despite the Lord's specific and repeated warnings. Again and again the Lord had sent his prophets and seers to warn both Israel and Judah, turn from all your evil ways. Obey my commands and decrees, the entire law that I commanded your ancestors to obey, and that I gave you through my servants, the prophets. But the Israelites would not listen. They were as stubborn as their ancestors who had refused to believe in the Lord their God. They rejected his decrees and the covenant he had made with their ancestors, and they despised all his warnings. They worshipped worthless idols, so they became worthless themselves. They followed the example of the nations around them, disobeying the Lord's command not to imitate them. They rejected all the commands of the Lord their God and made 2 calves from metal. They set up an Asherah pole and worshipped Baal and all the forces of heaven. They set up an Asherah pole and worshipped Baal and all the forces of heaven. They even sacrificed their own sons and daughters in the fire. They consulted fortune tellers and practiced sorcery and sold themselves to evil, arousing the Lord's anger. Because the Lord was very angry with Israel, he swept them away from his presence. Only the tribe of Judah remained in the land. But even the people of Judah refused to obey the commands of the Lord their God, for they followed the evil practices that Israel had introduced. The Lord rejected all the descendants of Israel. He punished them by handing them over to their attackers until he had banished Israel from his presence. For when the Lord tore Israel away from the kingdom of David, they chose Jeroboam, son of Nebat, as their king. But Jeroboam drew Israel away from following the Lord and made them commit a great sin. And the people of Israel persisted in all the evil ways of Jeroboam. They did not turn from these sins until the Lord finally swept them away from his presence, just as all his prophets had warned. So Israel was exiled from their land to Assyria, where they remain to this day. The king of Assyria transported groups of people from Babylon, Cutha, Ava, Hamath, and Sepharvaim, and resettled them in the towns of Samaria, replacing the people of Israel. They took possession of Samaria and lived in its towns. But since these foreign settlers did not worship the Lord when they first arrived, the Lord sent lions among them, which killed some of them. So a message was sent to the king of Assyria. The people you have sent to live in the towns of Samaria do not know the religious customs of the God of the land. He has sent lions among them to destroy them because they have not worshipped him correctly. The king of Assyria then commanded, "Send one of the exiled priests back to Samaria. Let him live there and teach the new residents the religious customs of the God of the land." So one of the priests who had been exiled from Samaria returned to Bethel and taught the new residents how to worship the Lord. I got to turn a couple pages here because my study Bible has a kind of linear descendancy of who were the prophets. And so I'm going to see if I can show you here without kind of losing my page. So we kind of have a little breakdown of when they came, who they were, and what they did, which is actually really nice because this whole passage, all of 2 Kings, 1 Kings, and 2 Kings, has just been a lineage of the kings and their kingship as far as how long they ruled, what happened. And it really is, it's just really highlights because it says the primary understanding of every little event was in the books of the kings of Israel and the books of the kings of Judah. And so here, this gives a specific timeline of which prophet was in which timeline, who they were, what they did, the specific people that they ministered to, their main message, significance, a bunch of fantastic stuff. And it looks to be about 400 years of it. So fantastic. I'm going to continue and finish the rest of chapter 17 though now. So here we go. We had just left the foreigners settling in Israel, and now we're back. But these various groups of foreigners also continued to worship their own gods. In town after town where they lived, they placed their idols at the pagan shrines that the people of Samaria had built. Those from Babylon worshipped idols of their god Succoth Benoth. Those from Cutha worshipped their god Nergal. And those from Hamath worshipped Ashima. The Avites worshipped their gods Nibaz and Tartak. And the people from Sepharvaim even burned their own children as sacrifices to their gods Adramelech and Anamelech. These new residents worshipped the Lord, but they also appointed from among themselves all sorts of people as priests to offer sacrifices at their places of worship. And though they worshipped the Lord, they continued to follow their own gods according to the religious customs of the nations from which they came. And this is still going on today. Religious customs of the nations from which they came. And this is still going on today. I just repeated that. My bad. They continue to follow their former practices instead of truly worshiping the Lord and obeying the decrees, regulations, instructions, and commands he gave the descendants of Jacob, whose name he changed to Israel. For the Lord had made a covenant with the descendants of Jacob, and commanded them, "Do not worship any other gods, or bow before them, or serve them, or offer sacrifices to them, but worship only the Lord, who brought you out of Egypt with great strength and a powerful arm. Bow down to him alone, and offer sacrifices only to him. Be careful at all times to obey the decrees, regulations, instructions, and commands that he wrote for you. You must not worship other gods. Do not forget the covenant I made with you, and do not worship other gods. You must worship only the Lord your God. He is the one who will rescue you from all your enemies." But the people would not listen and continued to follow their former practices. So while these new residents worship the Lord, they also worship their idols. And to this day, their descendants do the same. There's a lot to unpack in this passage, guys. So that was all of chapter 17. There's two things I really want to touch base on. One is the identification of other idols. We still do that to this day. And it's interesting to see what is fought over in the Middle East, even in this nation, as we continue to want to separate ourselves really from the roots of our nation, which is a Christian origin, Christian foundation. And so it's super interesting to me that as we get more comfortable, as we get more power, influence, and affluence, we naturally gravitate away from God as we become more comfortable and confident in our own abilities, not realizing that He's the source of all of it. And so that's super interesting for me because we see that since the beginning of time. The more collection of intelligence and power and wealth and all those things, the more we seem to think that we're running the show. And we're often shown that that's not the case in brutal manners. And we continue to repeat the cycle. And so it's super discouraging. But one other passage in here that really confused me was in verse 16 of chapter 17 that we're reading, when it references the forces of heaven. It says, "They rejected all the commands of the Lord their God and made 2 calves from metal. They set up an Asherah pole and worshiped Baal and all the forces of heaven." Okay, so they shouldn't be doing the Asherah pole and they shouldn't be worshiping Baal. But it's as if to say that those are all a part, and I don't, and this might just be an ignorance of a translation or a structure of English grammar that's making my mind struggle with this. They set up an Asherah pole and worshiped Baal and all the forces of heaven. So they were worshiping the forces of heaven. Good. Yes, I think that's a good thing. Or maybe that's not all the forces of heaven. Does that mean that they were also worshiping angels, which nothing is worthy of worship but the living God? And so I think I might need to dissect that verse 16 a little bit more because it confuses me, and it might just be my translation. So I'm going to have to do a deeper dive. Oh, I take that back. My study Bible actually has something I feel like I need to read to you guys because I'm struggling with that verse a whole lot. So, chapter 17, verse 16, the breakdown of this: the forces of heaven refers to the Canaanite practice of worshiping the sun, moon, and constellations. These were Assyrian gods that were being added to their religion. So, heavens meaning sky. Okay, heaven's in this one, heaven's bad. Got it. All heaven's bad. That makes a lot more sense to me. So I'm happy that I went back there and went over that with you guys because now I have a greater understanding, and I hope that you do too. So that makes a whole lot more sense, and that still continues. Make sure you're making that separation. We serve only the living God. And my favorite part, I'll make one more connection, and then I'll let you guys go because I'm kind of going on a little bit longer. This video is a little bit lengthy. When you're doing that, my favorite example of this is that you can't do anything but worship God in all that you do. Why? Because God is so big, there's no other room inside of you for anything but Him. And when you make room, you're not making room for God. When you make room for other things, other idols, other people, other things that you prioritize at the same level of God, or maybe a little bit above, maybe a little bit less, maybe just too close. But He says relationally, you should hate everything compared to Him. And that's bold. That is a super strong statement. But it makes so much sense. He's so big and so powerful, and there's so much of Him that unless it needs to permeate every single cell in your body, there's no room for anything else if you're truly following Him. And so I'll leave you guys with that. So have a good night. God bless. I love you. Jesus loves you. And I'll be back for chapter 18 of 2 Kings, where the header reads, Kings of Judah, Hezekiah rules in Judah. And so there's also going to be a little bit of a reflection over the next 7 chapters. We're going to reflect on surviving kingdom, the surviving kingdom. And so, make sure you guys are making room for God, guys. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for chapter 18 of 2 Kings. Have a great night.